Hey there, welcome back as we continue this journey in Intro to Sociology. Today we're going to be talking about education and religion. These are two very important social institutions because they teach our values, they shape our attitudes, they maintain traditions, they bring people together, they control our behavior, and they're two institutions in which we can grapple with social change. So first we're going to talk about education. This transmits our attitudes, knowledge, beliefs, values, norms, and our skills to society. Schooling is a subcategory of education. It's formal training, and schooling is provided in a classroom. So to dig right into theory, functionalists believe education, formal schooling, is good for socialization. It transmits knowledge, it transmits culture, it increases cultural integration, which kind of increases our social bonds. Education benefits taxpayers because the more educated a person is, usually the more income they earn, so the higher taxes they pay. But it also has some latent functions too. Now, latent functions are hidden functions that aren't necessarily intentional. Education provides childcare for working parents. It decreases job competition, because the longer someone's in school, the less competition they're creating for older generations. It creates social networks, so the people you go to school with, you may end up getting a job from or with or things like that. And it's good for business because there's a lot of people who make educational materials, think textbooks, online quizzes, things like that. So to skip over to conflict theory, conflict theorists will look at achievement gaps that occur. There's disparity in academic performance between groups. 50 years ago, the largest disparity was between black people and white people, but now it's between social classes, think upper class and lower class. One reason is budget cuts to public schools. Think of people who live in a lower income area are going to have less revenue to give the schools to pay for programming and teachers and extracurricular activities and things like that. Next, I'd like to discuss college with you a little bit because colleges are more committed to admitting higher income people, even though there's certain aspects that try to level the playing field. Also, from a feminist perspective, women are more likely to graduate college but are underrepresented in certain job fields. Think science, technology, mathematics, STEM fields. Symbolic Interactionism shows active processes. It involves students, teachers, peers, parents, everybody that's involved in the educational system. But this also includes tracking and labeling. Now, tracking is putting people in categories based on their knowledge. So when you test into a certain type of class or test down into a certain type of class, it can be difficult because it can lead to labeling. With labeling comes a lot of self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes, as we've talked about in previous chapters. Sometimes we can act out what we're labeled as well as help teachers develop stereotypes that affect our attitudes, our actions, our decisions, and also develop implicit bias. The implicit bias are these unconscious prejudices or stereotypes, as I mentioned. Now, issues in education. We have test scores, we have teaching towards the test, which teachers don't like to do, and the subjectivity of that sort of thing on what you can do with test results. There's also politics that are threatening public education, because some politicians, as I discussed in the political unit last time, some politicians would rather see private schools thrive that cost more money, and they would also like to see them receive more money for educating students. Now, as for an international comparison, American children actually rank really low. It's in the 20s and 30s when we're looking at things like math and science. There are, on average, about 30 countries doing better than the U.S. in education in general. We're among the lowest college graduation rates for industrialized nations. One of the other issues that becomes a debate is affirmative action. This was a policy set forth to try to help more minority groups enter things like college. What isn't much known is women tend to disproportionately benefit from affirmative action than other minority groups. But the ones that are against affirmative action talk about meritocracy. That's when you move forward based on your own actions, working hard and reaching your goals just by working hard. So yeah, it's based on work and effort. Probably the other biggest issue would be student loans. There's trillions of dollars in debt right now from people who graduated college who are having a really hard time getting ahead. Now we can get into religion a little bit as a social institution. It has shared beliefs, values, practices that tend to be related to the supernatural. Durkheim described sacred religion, and he described profane religion. Sacred being anything that people see as awe-inspiring, supernatural. Profane being the ordinary elements of life that aren't necessarily related to religion. Religiosity is an important word. That's basically how people tend to demonstrate their beliefs. Spirituality is a personal quest to feel connected to a reality greater than oneself. Now, there's another term out there called cult, and we always hear this in a derogatory sense. It's a religious group devoted to beliefs and practices that are outside of those accepted by mainstream society. Many people see this as a derogatory term. A lot of sociologists use the term new religious movement. And these new religious movements usually involve a charismatic leader, so think like Jesus, having exceptional or superhuman powers and qualities. So Jesus was a very charismatic person who helped develop a following. Now, a sect is a group that breaks apart from established religion. This is often confused with denomination. And denomination is on better terms with the group that it broke away from. Sect is seen as like going a complete 180, where denomination is seen as like just adding a characteristic or two and taking away a characteristic or two, but generally they're on good terms with each other. So think Protestantism versus Lutheranism. They're on good terms with each other. There's not a lot of fighting, and certainly not no wars going on there. We have the term ecclesia. This is an official religious organization that claims everyone in society as their members. Some of them have a major authority, such as in the Middle East. A lot of countries considered to be Muslim have that characteristic of being a Muslim country. There's a lot of these type of countries that maybe don't have as much authority but claim everybody there belongs to a religion, such as England, Sweden, Norway. And now we're going to look at the who of religion. So who is religious? Well, women tend to be more religious, as well as that group we discussed in Family and Aging of 65 or older. Percentage-wise within racial ethnic groups, black people are more religious than any other race or ethnic group. Latinos tend to be shifting. Just 10, 20 years ago, they were about 50% Catholic, but that tends to be shifting to more Protestant. Asian Americans are the most diverse religious group. They practice a lot of different religions. Now, looking at our government in terms of religion, 62% of Americans believe actually that it's important for our president to be a strong Christian. 72% of Americans endorse public displays of like Christmas and other forms of Christianity. Christians get exemptions for things like vaccines. Many states don't even require parents to seek medical treatment for their children. Like, they won't be taken to court for neglect or anything if their religion says like they don't believe in receiving medical care from a hospital. A lot of this is due to fundamentalism. That's where you take literal meaning from different scriptures in said religion. And despite our Constitution, there is a separation of church and state in that Constitution, meaning religion can't be governed to us, but sometimes it creeps in and causes some controversy in schools. So think of like schools that teach evolution that have been under fire, or schools that require students to recite a Pledge of Allegiance. Now that was a creed developed in 1892, and it didn't start requiring the words under God until the 1950s, which is interesting because before that, people were just pledging allegiance to a piece of cloth on the wall, which I find interesting. As for getting into theories on religion, a functionalist will tell you that religion provides belonging, it provides identity, meaning, emotional comfort, social control over deviant behavior. A conflict theorist is going to say that it promotes and legitimizes social inequality. Religion condones strife, violence between groups. It justifies oppression of poor people. A feminist scholar will say that religion subordinates women and it excludes them from, decision-making processes. We already know it excludes them from leadership roles in many types of church, denomination, and sects. But they would say it legitimizes patriarchal control of society. A symbolic interactionism, now I was going to look at processes here. It would say that religion provides meaning to everyday life through symbols, through rituals, through beliefs that bind people together in a physical and spiritual community. So that's all we're going to say for today about education and